Okay. Today's class is the sixth week's class, and today we're gonna talk about the fifth chapter of the Albright's book, and we're gonna finish it today. So, so I think omit the sixth chapter in here. We're gonna see the only fifth chapter today, and it is getting started with the VBAs again. And then in the next week, we won't see this today. We're gonna see working with ranks after the hour exam 2 weeks later. Okay, so you have seen in our first example input boxes, but we did not mention them in detail. The input box function, it's a function, takes at least one argument, a prompt to the user. A second argument that is often used is the title that appears in the top of the dialog box. For example, assume that we are trying to get a price from the user and we use the input box function. We say input box and open the parentheses. And its first parameter is the prompt to the user. So you say that enter the product's unit price. And you see this message in here. And so we have a title as well. And if you would like to define the title, you can either use one parameter here, or you can either define the title and then you say selling price, for example, as your title. Uh, these are all strings, as you see in here. And finally, when this function works, you're going to see this input box at the screen, and it will get the unit price from the user. And as you see here, the dialog box has OK and cancel buttons, a title, a prompt, and a text for the user's input, text box for the user's input. So our text box is in here. When the user enters a value and clicks OK button, the user's input is assigned to the variable's price, variable price in here. So the variable's value gonna be the value entered by the user at the text box. Okay. So we have message boxes. You already seen them in our first example again. The message box, you write it by MSG box. It's a function again. Takes at least one argument, a message that you want to display. Okay. So two other optional arguments often used are a button indication and a title. A typical example, as you see the following. So for example, you say MSG box, you write a string, it's your message to the user. For example, the product's unit price is $240. Okay, so you can stop here and you can just show your message, but you can define the icon in here. For example, it can be error or information, and there are some other icons in there. So in here we used VB information, Visual Basic Information. So because of that, you see the I in here. And again, you can define the title. So the selling price title comes to here. And we have one OK button if you don't indicate which buttons you need or not. Okay, so this is the default setting in here. Okay, so you can define your buttons as well. So MSG box can be used for simple logic by including the appropriate buttons. For example, the following line not only displays the message with yes or no buttons. For example, uh, we have a variable in here result, and when we say MSG box, and our first parameters is do you want to continue? It is our message, and then you can indicate your buttons in here. you say that I need yes and no buttons. So for this, you use the keyword VB yes no, and then again you can indicate your title in here. You can define your title in here, and in this case, you see this type of message box in here. Okay, so I think you see the difference between message boxes in this slide and in this slide. The value of result will be VB yes or VB no. So two built-in VBA constants. They are two constants from the VBA. We saw them in the previous week. You could then use a logical if statement if to proceed appropriately, depending on the whether the result is VB yes or VB no. Okay, so in here, in the input box, the value in here, the value that your user entered to the text box in here. Okay, but if you use message box, it's a message, but in here you can again get some information from the user. For example, your user can click to yes or no, and in this case, if you use that way, your result will be VB yes or VB no constants from the Visual Basic. Okay, so according to that, you can do one job and you can do another job by controlling yes and no. Okay, so let me check. Okay, so we can continue statements on more than one line. Lines of the code can often get long and run past the right side of the screen, particularly with messages. For example, if you have a long message, so you're gonna need more than one line. You can continue them another line by using underscore character as you see here and preceded by a space. Don't forget the space, and I think it is important for the Visual Basic editor. So, for example, we use MSG box in here, and again in the MSG box you say input box. So in the input box you say type your full address, city, state, zip code, and user's address, and then you assume that your line finishes in here, so you can continue by underscore preceded by space as you see in here, and you can use the second line for it, and you can say you're going to use VB information and the title as the user's address. Okay, so as you notice in here, we can use MSG box, message box, and input box together. And when you run this code, it first gonna ask the city, state, and zip code to the user with the title of user's address. So here is the main part. And then when you get this information from the user, the message box will write this information, and then it's gonna say the user's address is the title, and it's gonna show the this icon from the user. Okay, so you can use them together in one line as you see. So I don't know if you have noticed or not. So we have used two types of the functions in here. In some of them we did not use the parentheses. In some of them we have used parentheses. The first simply displays a message in here. For example, you say message box, thank you for supplying for me, and you have used exclamation icon, and your title is name accepted. Okay, so the second in here, second line, captures the result of the message box as Visual Basic yes or Visual Basic no in the result variable, as you see in here. So in the second line we capture something, but in the first line we just simply display a message. The rule for the parentheses for the input box function and the message function, and for all other VBA functions is that parentheses are required when the result is captured in a variable or used in some way. So you could use parentheses in the first line, but it was optional because you did not get any information and you did not capture anything. But in the second line, you are capturing something from user. In here, you have to use parentheses. Okay, difference comes from here. Well, so you can use Visual Basic Excel, sorry, you can use Excel functions in Visual Basic application as well. So, for example, uh, you can use sort, sum, minimum, maximum, vertical lookup, sum if functions, etc. They are all built-in functions of the Excel. So you can reach them from the Visual Basic and you can use them in your code. So I think they are really helpful to things because, for example, I think you know from your previous classes, sorting, vertical lookup needs some time to implement. So you can just with a one line you can use them in here. So how we do that? We call worksheet function object, and then we put a dot in here, and then we indicate our function. So for example, we say worksheet function sum. So where we are gonna sum, we are gonna find the sum. It is the range between A1 to A10. So it is starting from the first cell from the leftmost and topmost cell and goes 10 cells and finds the sum of them. So we're gonna spend all week to the range in our next class, but simply we define a range by this function in here, and we say the left topmost cell of the range and right topmost, uh, and uh, last, sorry. So we say the top and left cell in the beginning in here, for example, as A1, and we say the last and the rightmost cell as A10 in here. So if you have one column in here, so they're gonna be the one A and A together in here, but you could have two-dimensional as well. So this A10 could be B10 as well, according to your need. Okay. So comments. As you know from the all other your classes, again, it is extremely important that you document your work. A comment is a text that you type anywhere in your program to indicate to yourself or someone else what your code means or how it works. So it is important in Visual Basic application as well. So how we're gonna do that in the Visual Basic editor? So we use this for a single code. For example, you type single quote here, and then you write your comment. For example, the purpose of the following section is to calculate revenue. And the line is then colored green, and it is ignored by Visual Basic. Indenting. We have talked about this in our previous class, but they are completely equivalent and we Visual Basic treats each of them in an identical way if you have used indenting or if you have not used indenting. It is not a Python. It is not like a Python because in Python, as you know, for example, in here, you define the starting point and the end point of the for loop, if condition, classes or functions as here. But in, in Visual Basic, we have some keywords for all starting and the endpoints. So because of that, Visual Basic can understand where function starts. For example, your subroutine starts in here and it starts in here. For example, Your your for loop starts in here and it starts ends in here. Your this for loop starts in here, ends in here. If starts in here, and because it is a one line, we don't write end if, but you could use end if to indicate where your if statement ends. So because of that, indenting is not it is optional. But we should always recommend that using indenting because you're gonna implement some code and maybe you're gonna give your colleague or you're gonna give it to your professor, your friends, etc. And because of that, it should be readable. So if you compare the two sides, at the left side, you see a code at the right side you see another one, but they are completely identical, but at the right side it is much more readable by the user. Okay, so for the reading issues we recommend to use indenting always. You already know strings, but in Visual Basic it is still a simple text surrounded by double quotes. Strings are nearly always arguments to the input box, message box, and the many other functions. String cannot be written literally, and sometimes string cannot be written literally and must be pieced together in sections. This is called string concatenation. For example, assume that you ask the uh, product's name from the user, and you're gonna say in the message box, the product name is something, the product variable in here. So as you see in here, still it is string, but because we don't know the what your user will enter to the screen, we concatenate strings as in this way. For example, you say that the product's name is, you use the double quotes in here, and then you use and operator to concatenate them together. Okay, then your message will be correct. What your user enters to the screen. Okay. For example, we see another one in here. Let's see. We have a subroutine get product's name. You could define a product variable as dim product as integer by using here. The product name are get from the input box, and then you use uh, your message box with the information icon in here. So this is similar what we did here, but we just indicate our icon in here, okay, in this subroutine. So I would like to give you some 2-3 minutes to try this function in your exam because I think uh, most of us did not try writing any something to our Visual Basic editor. So please take 2-3 minutes and then try to write this code, try to run this code in your screen. I think most of you are using a computer right now. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna rescreen my share. Screen sharing. So stop. And screen sharing. Okay, we open our exam, and as you see in here, we click. In my version, we click view, and we're gonna click the macros, and we're gonna open it, and our sub's name is get product name, and we're gonna say create. And then at this time it creates a module for us, and our sub is created by the IntelliSense property of the our function, our Visual Basic application. So we say that the product as string. So as you see in here, because of the IntelliSense, we get some suggestions from the Visual Basic editor. So you can use tab in here. And then when we move, for example, you need to write dim with the capital D here. But if you write with the lowercase letter, so it automatically corrects it for yourself. Okay, we get the product variable from the user, we say input box. And then with double quotes, we say enter the product's name. Okay. And then in the message box, we say that the product's name is we stop here with the double quote, and we for concatenation we use and signal sign in here. We say product, and then again, for example, we are gonna need a dot maybe, so we use that in here. And then, for example, maybe you're gonna need Visual Basic information box, information icon. And as you see here, you have other options. We used Visual Basic information. Okay, to run, we click the run button in here, or you can just click F5. For example, when you click because of the input box, we get the this input box function. And for example, car tire. And if when we click OK, the message box will say the product's name is car tire, and we see the information icon in here. So basically, it's like this. For example, if you would need to write some comments in here, you can say simple example, for example. So in this case, as you see in here, your editor will omit this line. Well, so I mentioned at the last part in the previous class, but if we close here, and if you're gonna need to save your macros as well, please do not just save this file. So keep your codes. You're gonna click the save as, and for example desktop, and you're gonna say not Excel workbook, so it should be Excel macro enabled workbook. Otherwise, you're gonna lose all of your codes. Okay, so this is okay. This is important. You just learn at the second time, but I would like to show you at the first time. Please do not lose any record. Okay, I can save from this time. Okay, let's move on. Right. So we have seen this example. So we have other useful string functions as well. So these are right, left, middle, and line. So as you see here, the right function returns the rightmost uh, some number of rightmost characters of the string. So firstly, you provide your string and you provide how many characters do you need from the right side. So at this time, your short string where one variable will be albright. Okay. So left is the similar one. You write your string in here and then you say how many characters you need from the left, and your short string 2 gonna be as Christian, and you can use the middle function as well. In your middle function you pass three parameters. The first parameter is your string again, and the second parameter where to start, and the last parameter is how many characters we need. For example, in this case, so you have one, two, three. There's a blank character in here. So four. It starts from one, two, three, four. The fourth one is the C in here because of that. It started with C, and we're gonna go five characters. So because of that, your middle function will produce crease in here. The len function returns the length of your string. Again, we have a space in here and in here. So they are counted as well. So in string function, returns the uh, your search characters index to you. For example, again, it gets three parameters. For the first one is where to start to search. So if you don't indicate this, it is basically one by default. The second one is your string again, and the last one is your characters to search. So for example, we search comma in here, and then in here it's gonna return you 9. But in some cases, maybe your character does not that there is no any character with your search character as in here. For example, there is no dot in the albright comma crease. So in this case, it's gonna return you 0. That means there is no anything in this character in that string. Okay. So you can specify a member from a collection. For example, you have 5 worksheets, and maybe you're trying to do something in your worksheets, but you're gonna need to specify where you're gonna do your job. You can indicate them by index, that means by a number, or you can do this by a name, that means with a string. For example, you can either use worksheets 2 in the parentheses, and you can use either worksheets data with double quotes in here. For example, assume that you have a data worksheet. The name method, as in here, is much more preferred because, for example, your data worksheet at the second index. Now, maybe later you're gonna insert more worksheets and it's gonna be the third worksheet maybe later. So because of that, using the name much safer for you. Okay, so we can specify objects down a hierarchy. For example, to specify objects down a hierarchy, you separate them with a period, as in here. And with objects farther down the hierarchy to the right, as in. So we start with the topmost hierarchy from oops, sorry. For example, in here we say the workbooks, and we use the workbooks sales, and then later in the workbook we have worksheets. We indicate the worksheets march, and then we indicate the range in that worksheet. So the topmost hierarchy at the left side and the rightmost downmost hierarchy at the right side. Okay, so we can use also active workbook and active worksheet as well. So if you don't indicate your workbook or worksheet with a name, so you just say the active workbook. So in that case, where you click which is active, that your code will work in there. Okay, before a break, uh, we have two more slides, and you can specify a property as well. To specify a property of an object, you list the property name to the right of the object, separated by a period again. For example, you have a range object, and you can specify its property with period and its name. So a property can be set or returned. For example, you can set a range A1's value, for example, to sales for March, and then you can return a value of a property again as in here. So don't forget, assignments are from the right side to left side. We can specify a method as well. So to specify a method for an object, you list the method's name to the right of the object, separated by a period. For example, you can have an object like this, and maybe it has a method clear contents, and you use a period, and then you use the method's name. So I think they are almost the same thing with your object-oriented programming course in the previous semester. So we have objects, and we have methods of the objects, and we have the properties of the objects. Okay, so we can specify arguments of a method as well. So if a method has arguments, you list them separated by commas next to the method's name. Each argument should have the name of the argument, which can be found from the online help, followed by these signs in here. And for example, the following copies the A1 and B2 to range D1 to D10. Here, destination is the name of the argument of the copy method. So we have a copy method, we have range object, we have a copy method, and it has a parameter destination. We indicate destination as range D1 to D10, and please notice that there's a space in here. So if you have much more parameters, you can add them to here. Okay. In my case, maybe you wouldn't want to indicate the name of your parameter, but in this case, you need to be very, very sure where to write your parameter value, because if you miss the arrangement of your parameters, you're gonna get wrong results. As in here, it can be omitted, but it can be dangerous sometimes. Okay, so we're gonna give some bio break right now. So if you have any questions, we can talk. I'm here, but for our other friends, let's give 10-minute break, and then let's start 10:55. Okay. So if you have any questions, we can talk right now. Well, so the next topic today that we're going to talk is with construction. So it's a very helpful thing, and the easiest way to explain with construction is by using an example. as we're gonna see right now. Suppose that you want to set a number of properties for a range A1 in the March worksheet of the sales workbook. You could use the following code. For example, we can say workbooks sales worksheets March range A1 dot value is sales for March. And then again, we can do the same thing for horizontal alignment. We can do the same thing for font name, font bold property true or false, and font size. We can set the font size to 14. So as you see in here, we write the same thing again and again, as you see. So, excuse me. So with the with construction, we can use the same thing with at the bottom side in here. So you say that with workbooks sales, workbook worksheets March and range A1, and again the indentation is good to write, and you just say the rest of the width line in here. So you just say the rest in here. So you say that value, that horizontal alignment, and then you can say, you can use another width construction in here. You just say width that font. So it's gonna assume that you wrote here and you wrote that font here. So in this case, you can say that name times New Roman. So this should be at the second line, sorry. So that both true and that size 14. So you just indicate where your width statement in here ends. So for this one you use here, and for this one you use here. So it's a good way to write to make something to make your life easier. Okay, so screen updating. A Visual Basic application program for Excel sometimes makes many changes in one or more worksheets before eventually showing the result. During this time, the screen flicks always, and which wastes time, and it is certainly annoying because you show something very fast in your screen and it changes the maybe your worksheets, and it makes your program to run slower, and also it does not look very good. So the following line turns off the screen updating. It is essentially says do your work and just show me the result at the end. So you can say application.screen updating equals false. So you can set it true later, sometimes later. So it is optional. So display alerts. If you use the Excel interface to delete a worksheet, you get a warning, as you know in the following figure in here. So it asks you are sure, and etc. In some applications, maybe you don't want this warning, you just want the worksheet to be deleted. So in this case, and the other cases, so you can use the following line. So you just say application.display alerts false. But it can be dangerous if you keep your property at the false always. So for example, you can set it false first, and you can delete your worksheet, and then you can set it true again. So it is recommended. So don't forget this to make it back immediately to set true. So timer function. As programmers often like to see how long their programs take to run. So this is the easiest way to do in VBA's timers function. So it returns the current clock time. If it is used twice, once the beginning of this sum code and once at the end of the code. So when you calculate the difference between them, so you are gonna get the runtime. So don't forget, it returns seconds. So for example, we have a piece of code in here. We say that start time, it is a variable, equals timer. We enter any code in here, we do some job, and at the end, we calculate elapsed time as timer minus start time. So the timer now will have the end time, right? So the elapsed time will be this time in seconds. So you can show in your message box, and this section took that time and for example 5 seconds to run, as in here. So sometimes maybe we're gonna need this. So good programming practices. So these are the good habits to do. So the first thing is providing a sufficient comments, using indentation, using white spaces liberally, break long lines into multiple lines, name your variables appropriately. We have seen them in our previous week, in our previous class. Declare all of your variables, usually at the beginnings of the subs. So, as you know, we said that it is optional in Excel, but if you indicate this from the options, or if you write option explicit, it's gonna it's gonna force you to indicate and define your variables. So please try to declare all of your variables. Use the variant types as little as possible. As we said, for example, if you don't say dim I as integer, you can say just dim I. If you don't indicate as integer, your variable will be variant type, and it requires much more memory than the others. So because of that, they try to not to use variants, and break a complex program into small subs. Don't write a sub with 1,000 lines. Okay, so try to make your subs as simple as possible. Debugging. So debugging. Okay, I think there's a problem in here. Okay. So some programmers are more skillful and careful than others, but the sad fact is that we all make errors. Everybody makes errors, so it's the fact. So in the programming world, we say that these are bugs. The art of finding them and getting rid of the bugs is called debugging, and it is almost as important as programming itself. Debugging is basically a detective work, and it's like programming, and it takes practice. So there are three types of errors. The first one is syntax. The second one is runtime, and the other is logic errors. Syntax errors are usually the easiest to spot and fix it because they occur when you spell something wrong, omit a keyword, or commit various other grammatical errors. They are easy to spot because Visual Basic Editor typically detects them immediately and shows them in colors in red line and displays a warning in a message box. For example, if you define an if statement, for example, you could write if first number is greater than the second number, but if you forget to write then in here, it's gonna produce a syntax error for you. Runtime errors are more difficult to spot and fix. They occur when there is something wrong with your code, but the error is not discovered until you run your program. Everything seems good, but when you run it, you're going to see your error. So that's why it's called runtime error. The following is a typical example. So I would like to give you a minute to look, and if you try to find where the error is, so please tell me. So try to find where the runtime error maybe occur in here. So try to spot it. recording, and as we indicate, we create an array in here. Let me, okay, in here we create an array in here with the 10 length. So then you fill with some numbers in this for loop in here, and then the number of applications are defined by your user. So the problem is if your user enter 5, so it's gonna work without any problem. But if your user enter more than 10, for example 11, so you're gonna get the runtime error. So it is a typical example generally for the runtime errors. So you're gonna see that kind of warning in here, and it's gonna say you subscript out of range. So I recommend you to use debug button in here. So it's gonna show you a possible error line in the Visual Basic Editor. So just don't click add in here. Try to see where the problem occurs. Okay. A better version could be we could avoid from the runtime error by indicating, again, we're gonna see them in the arrays chapter, but you can create your array with parentheses in here. We say that dim my array parentheses as integer. Your program in this case knows the your array is uh, an array because of the parentheses, but there is no that there is no size in here. It is not indicated. Firstly, you get the input box function, and you get the number from the user, and you resize. It is the redim function in here, redimension function in here. You say the my array and reps. So in this case, so what your user enters to n reps, your array size will be that much. Okay, so we're gonna see them later, but we can avoid them as in this example. So there is another problem, I think. So can you spot the problem in here? There is another error. So again, we have not used any indentation, and I think it is hard to read. But a better version could be this. So if you use the indent, maybe you can catch the error this time. Are there anyone to catch it? Can catch it. Okay. So as you know in the previous slides, so we use sub in here. We finished with end sub. We use for each loop in here, and we ended it with next. And we use if, and we use end if. But if you see the width in here, we don't see any end width. So uh, the problem is not using the end width, okay? But in Visual Basic Editor, if you click the debug, when you see the error, it's gonna say you compile error and if without block if. So sometimes the Visual Basic Editor directs you wrongly, okay? Because you know that we use the if statement in here, and we already closed it with the end if. And so it says you something to try to see the end if part in here. So it says end if without if. But the problem is end with. So if you check the first thing that Visual Basic Editor says you, check the neighborhood. It's a general rule for the uh, for the debugging in Visual Basic. Okay. So let me see. I think there is a problem. Oops. Share screen again and let me see what's going on. Okay, we need to delete this. Logic errors. The third general type of error is a logic error, and it is the most insidious of the three of them because you frequently don't even know that you made an error. You run the program, it produces some result, and you congratulate yourself on work well done. However, if your program contains any logic errors, even a single tiny error, the result can be totally wrong. You might or might not get an error message to alert you to the problem. So everything seems correct, but you make a calculation error. It's a logic error. So from the Wikipedia, I have two examples for it. So as in here, some software bugs have been linked to disasters. Bugs in code that control the direct 25 radiation therapy machine were directly responsible for the patient deaths in 1980s. So because of the maybe they calculate the radiation value wrongly because of some error. So it was responsible for the patient's deaths. And in 1996, the European Space Agency agency's $1 billion prototype Ariane 5 rocket had to be destroyed less than a minute after launch due to a bug in the onboard guidance computer program. I think I have heard a similar thing for the rockets. So, for example, it could be the European engineers use meters, for example, for the distance. And the people, engineers from the United States and maybe some other countries used feet for the distance. And they don't even know what is the distance. Maybe they did not communicate it correctly. So European part wrote their part according to meters, and the other part wrote distance according to feet, for example. So because of that, some errors occurred and they lost this spaceship. Okay. So we have seen a logic error we see another logic error in here. Assume that you write a program that calculates the average of your cells. And as you see here, you see 10 lines, and maybe you calculate automatically please omit here for now. So your average is in here. So assume that you are trying to get the average of the first 10 lines, 10 cells. And when you assume that you write a program that counts the how many cells are filled in here. So it's gonna return you 10, and you find the sum of these cells in here. And when you divide the 10, you're gonna see average of 76.2. But however, you could you must be have seen you must have seen the scores in here, and you should have divide your numbers to 9. So these are that type of errors. So everything seems right, but you don't even know there's a problem. Okay, so today's last thing. So I'm gonna give you some 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes time to see where the error is. Please open a new workbook, get into the Visual Basic Editor, insert a module, and enter the following code. It's gonna produce you two problems. One of them cause a program to fail. So it won't allow you to run the program. When you correct it, the other one will cause an incorrect result. And explain what they are and try to fix them. Please take your time. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Try to write this code, and if you can find, please let me know what are they.
Hocam sesim geliyor mu?
Okay, let's try to write this code. So let me open my Excel again. I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare my screen. Screen share, screen 2. Okay. Okay. Let me see what the question is at the right side. We again open our Excel workbook, and we go view and macros, and with macros we can say exercise, and we're gonna create our macro. And let's see what the problem is, what the question is. So the exercise sub says that, okay, it was variables, but it does not matter. Let's say dim and pounds as integer and day of week as integer. And then we say that and pounds. So, for example, let's see, you created n pounds with capital P, and you can write here n pounds with the small p letter, and maybe you say that 17.5. When you click enter, it's gonna produce the same thing as you declared in here. So again, it is the help of IntelliSense to you. And then we say that they, because the letter, if the capital letter and lower letter differs in here, and we say that day of week is Monday. Then we use the message box. We say that again. So when you write a function, so it helps for the parameters for you. Okay. So you can see the help in here. The prompt, buttons, title, use it says help file, context, etc. Okay. So we can use this help from the editor as well. So we say that and pounds and we concatenate strings. Pounds were ordered on, let me say day of week. Okay, it's a simple exercise. Let's try to run it. I try to run this. So it says runtime error 13 type mismatch. If you click debug, it's gonna say that where the error have occurred. So if you check, the of week is string as Ahmed said. So it is string and it is defined as integer. So you can change here to string. You can correct it. And when you run again, as you see in the message box, 18 pounds were ordered on Monday. So the program worked very well. However, our number of pounds were 18.5. So it showed us 80. So this is a logic error. This is a kind of logic error because everything seemed right, but there is an error that we have not noticed maybe. So you can say that this is flawed. Okay, maybe double. And then when we run it, it's gonna show you 17.5 pounds were ordered on Monday. Okay, so that was the first example of our book. Well, so I think this is the last slide for today. So after this time, we're gonna talk about the your questions, and I'm gonna summarize today's class in Turkish a little bit. So, guys, do you have any questions?